everybody, Matt Quinlan here. Welcome to this week's edition of Whiteboard Wednesday, where we tackle real-life issues that we face as personal injury lawyers and try to answer some questions that we get from people that are dealing with personal injury claims, insurance claims on the phone, and that people that come into our office. So today we're going to talk about insurance issues related to Uber and Lyft accidents. Over the last few years, obviously, Uber and Lyft have just taken off. This ride-sharing phenomenon is amazing. We practice in San Francisco, live in San Francisco also, so we see Ubers and Lyfts everywhere. And over the past few years, we have seen a dramatic increase in the amount of Uber and Lyft-related accidents that we handle as personal injury lawyers and that we get phone calls about. And one of the primary issues that someone runs into initially is who's going to cover them with the insurance policy. There's a lot of finger pointing, there's a lot of confusion around it. It's actually gotten quite a bit better recently. Back when Uber and Lyft first hit the scene a few years ago, there was a lot of confusion about who was covered. Uber would claim that the driver's personal insurance had to cover liability claims, where the driver's liability policy would say, nope, you were working trying to make money with Uber, you should have them cover any loss. So people that were injured in accidents, of course, were left holding the bag with no insurance company stepping forward to claim responsibility for the loss. So we've gotten past a lot of that, and Uber and Lyft and other rideshare companies have really stepped forward over the last year or two and have put in place $1 million in liability coverage under certain circumstances. Also, drivers and their insurance companies have worked together a bit to create these hybrid policies between commercial policies, which they were required to have prior to Uber changing, and Lyft, I should say, changing their philosophies on insurance, and just a standard personal auto policy, which would oftentimes deny claims. So we've gotten past that. We've got now a structure, some rules that are pretty well followed, and we're able to now identify the proper insurance company to bring a personal injury claim to. So this week we want to talk about the ins and outs of bringing a personal injury claim as it relates to who the insurance company will be that you will bring the claim with. So before I get started, I want to cover briefly a couple of terms that I'm going to be using throughout the video, and I want to make sure everybody's crystal clear on what these things are. The first is liability coverage. So liability coverage is the insurance coverage that you have in your own auto policy that covers you for losses and claims that are brought against you for harm that you do, injuries you cause, accidents you cause, that type of thing. Your liability coverage and the limits of it are the amount of money that the insurance company will be willing to pay out on your behalf. How much liability coverage does a person have? Well, that depends. The more coverage you have, obviously, the more expensive it is. In California, the minimum insurance that you must carry for liability is $15,000 per person and $30,000 per accident. Without it, you're driving illegally, you're committing a crime, and you can be cited for it as well. So you can rest assured that unless someone is driving uninsured and without insurance, they will have at least $15,000 per person and $30,000 per accident to cover any damages that they cause in an auto accident. The other topic I'm going to be talking about quite a bit here today is UIM, which stands for underinsured motorist. This is also a part of your own auto policy, and in cases involving personal injuries, it oftentimes does in fact come up, and we find ourselves making claims against our UIM coverage of our own auto policies to cover losses that exceed the value of the policy limits of the responsible party, and particularly the liability coverage that they carry. So UIM, I should mention, we just wrote a blog about this this week. We posted it. You should go check that out. I'll leave a link down below in the comments, or in the description rather. Go check that out. It's really valuable. It's really kind of one of the most practical pieces of advice that we can give. I tell my friends and my family, check this out. Get UIM. Here's all the information you need. It's one of those things that a personal injury lawyer like myself doesn't always have advice to give to people when they haven't been involved in an accident. But this is the type of thing that you can do. It's proactive. It's totally responsible. It's the thing that you should be doing. It's the type of thing that if you get in an accident and you need it and you don't have it, you're going to be beating yourself up about it. So go check out our blog. about UIM. Really informative, and I think it's worth your while and worth the read. UIM coverage. So UIM coverage is always secondary to the liability coverage. You can never go after UIM unless you've gotten the entire policy limits available from the third party. If the person is uninsured, you can make a claim against your uninsured motorist policy. And in that particular instance, since there is no insurance for the third party, of course, you can make a claim immediately for your uninsured motorist. The thing about uninsured motorists is you cannot stack it on top of the liability coverage of the third party. So let's say that you have 15,000, 30,000 UIM coverage, and the person that harms you or is in an accident, is at fault, and you're injured and bring a claim, has 1530 as well. You cannot go get $15,000 from that person and then go to your own insurance and try to get $15,000 more. It doesn't work like that. You can only get as much coverage as your UIM limits allow. So in other words, your UIM and your UM insure you a certain amount of money will be available to you in the event you're hurt. Once you get that amount of money, they're not going to pay you any more than that. With UIM, once you bring one, they step into the shoes of the third party. Okay, so it's your own insurance, but now they are finding themselves in a unique position because they're going to have to pay you as if they were the third party. Obviously, at that point, there's somewhat of a conflict of interest. They're your insurance company, but they're going to have to pay you a claim, and they don't want to pay you a claim. Insurance companies are for-profit businesses. They're not in the business of paying out claims, loosely, right? They try to save as much money as they can. They try to keep their shareholders happy. They've done a great job of marketing themselves and with all the PR, like being in good hands and being great neighbors and all that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, insurance companies are for-profit businesses, and the more they give you, the less they keep for themselves for profit. So keep that in mind, especially when you bring UIM claims. Also, as it relates to UIM, the unique position that you find yourself in when you bring one is that suddenly they owe you a duty to treat you with good faith. Okay, this is only applicable to your own insurance company. Another person's insurance company, they don't owe you anything. They can mistreat you, mishandle you, deny your claim, give you the runaround, waste your time, etc. And there's nothing you can do about it except sue them. Hire a lawyer and sue them. With UIM claims, they owe you a duty to act in good faith. And if they don't, they open themselves up to a bad faith insurance claim, which is an additional tort on top of the personal injury claim that you're bringing. It gives you quite a bit of leverage when you are dealing with them and negotiating a settlement, because if they are delaying, if they are giving you the runaround, if they're not treating you fairly, not only can you continue to pursue your UIM claim for a fair settlement, but you can also sue them in court on top of the personal injury claim for bad faith. And that entitles an injured person to additional damages for the pain and suffering that they have to go through for having to be mistreated basically by their insurance company. So this puts you in a really good position to negotiate a deal. So I, as a personal injury lawyer, would always much rather be dealing with a UIM insurance company as opposed to a third-party claim, because I know they owe my client something. Third parties don't owe me. Okay, so those two topics we're going to be talking about here today, they're going to come up. And the issue at hand is accidents involving Lyft and Uber. So there are a few different ways you can be involved in an accident with Lyft or Uber. Obviously, one is as a passenger. As a passenger, you're not at fault, clearly. You're in the back seat. There's nothing that you did. So necessarily, if you're injured in an accident while you're a passenger at Uber or Lyft, either the Uber or Lyft driver is responsible for the accident, or a third party is responsible for the accident. If Uber or Lyft causes the accident, they have $1 million in liability coverage. So you're going to be covered, obviously to the tune of $1 million, and that will cover, 99.9% of all personal injury claims. If the third party is responsible, then you need to bring a claim against the third party. Now, you don't know how much insurance that they have, obviously, so you have to either bring a claim yourself or hire an attorney to do that. They'll reach out to the insurance company and will find out what the policy limits are, and if your personal injuries and damages warrant a policy limit settlement, you get it from the third party. if in fact you do get the entire policy, then you're going to find yourself saying, okay, great, I've got some money, but I haven't been fairly, fully compensated for what I'm going through, what I went through. So you're going to be looking to bring a UIM claim. The first place you're going to turn is your own UIM. Okay, if you have a policy at all, will have some level of UIM. I don't know what it is. It depends on several factors, including how much you're willing to spend and how much coverage you wanted to afford yourself. But you must turn first to your own UIM and get the policy limits there if possible, which would cover you in addition to the third party and what they had to offer. If you're able to either get the additional money from your own UIM coverage and meet that policy, whatever you might have, you can then turn to Uber or Lyft's UIM policy, which is $1 million. So at the end of the day, if you're a passenger in Uber or Lyft and you're injured, you're going to have access to $1 million if it's warranted. Now, getting $1 million, I see a lot online and whatnot. Everyone seems to think getting $1 million is a piece of cake. That's not true. $1 million injury is quite a significant and unique injury. So, that right there should be enough to cover almost everybody's injury claim. Now, the other way that you might find yourself involved in an accident with Uber or Lyft is you're out as a driver, or you're out riding your bike, or even as a pedestrian, and an Uber car hits you, causes an accident. Uber's at fault. You're hurt. What do you do then? How does that work? Well, obviously, Uber's going to be responsible for the damages that they've caused you, but it's not really all that simple, okay? Because the way these ride-sharing apps work is you log into them, which makes you available for rides. You accept rides, and once you accept it, then you travel to the destination of the rider, and then you pick the rider up, and then you start your trip. So there are several phases of the process, and depending on where the driver of the Uber is in that process depends on how you can recover and from whom you can recover. So obviously the first possibility is the app's off. Okay? The person's driving around the city, but they're not driving for Uber or Lyft. They don't even have the app on. They're not looking for work. They're not looking for a ride, and Uber's got nothing to do with that. Okay, if somebody's an Uber driver 6 days a week and you happen to encounter them on the 7th day, you're not going to have a claim against Uber. Their app is off. They are not working. So if you're injured as a person in a car, whether you're driving or a passenger in someone else's car, or a bicyclist, or a pedestrian by an Uber driver, he or she may still have the sticker on the car. You cannot bring a claim against Uber. So what you have to do is bring a claim against the driver's own personal liability coverage. You don't know how much that is, right? Uber doesn't regulate, Lyft doesn't regulate the amount of liability coverage that their own drivers have to carry. They just have to carry some because it's the California law. So you're going to need to bring a claim for your injuries against the driver's personal auto policy, coverage amount unknown. If the amount is unsatisfactory and will not cover you wholly for your damages, then what you need to do is turn to your own UIM. Hopefully you have good UIM coverage. I'll plug my blog post that I did last week about that particular issue. And if you do, no harm, no sweat, you're going to have the coverage. And like I mentioned before, you're going to have the benefit of increased negotiating power because you're going to have a bad faith claim, the possibility of it hanging over the head of the negotiations. So when it's offline, no Uber, claim against the driver, UIM. Okay, sorry, we're back. We pride ourselves on only shooting this one time, but our battery went dead on the camera, so here we are, we're back. Let me pick up where I was cut off. The other time that is relevant here is when the app is on, okay? When the person is actively looking for work, when the person that's driving the Uber or the Lyft actually is seeking passengers, there are a few different phases of that process that I mentioned earlier. The first one is Uber, Lyft driver turns on the apps looking for riders, doesn't yet have one. Driving around town, hoping somebody pings them and they get to pick up the ride. In situations like that, if you were involved as either a person in an automobile, a bicycle, or a pedestrian with an Uber or Lyft driver that is looking for a rider but does not yet have one, you are going to have to bring a claim against the Uber or Lyft driver's personal liability insurance coverage. Again, you don't know what that is. You're kind of at the mercy of the policy that the person chose to buy, and obviously it may be inadequate. And if it is inadequate, the good news is Uber and Lyft do afford some limited coverage to people that are injured in that particular window. And that is $50,000 per person and $100,000 per accident. So, it's a decent amount that will cover you. Obviously, if the driver has insurance limits that are 50, 100 or greater, then you're not going to be able to bring a claim against Uber. But at least you know that you're going to have access to $50,000. If you're injured in an accident while an Uber or Lyft driver is actively seeking a rider but doesn't yet have one. After you exhaust the policy limits of the $50,000, then you can turn to your own UIM. And again, it really depends on what kind of insurance coverage you have. Get good UIM is the best advice I can give you. It protects you in all kinds of circumstances. It will, in fact, protect you as a pedestrian. It will protect you as a bicyclist. It will protect you in a car, not even your own car, somebody else's car. You can be driving somebody else's car, a passenger in somebody else's car. UIM follows you everywhere. And if you're involved in an injury accident with another automobile, your UIM coverage will kick in and it will protect you. Really, really recommend you look into that. The next period of time that you could be involved in an accident with an Uber or Lyft driver is when they have received a ride request, they've accepted it, and they're en route to pick up the rider. In situations like that, if you're injured due to the Uber driver or the Lyft driver's bad driving, then you're going to be afforded $1 million in coverage. So no problems there, no worries if they're going to pick somebody up. Same thing applies if they have already picked somebody up and they have a passenger and they injure you by running a light or somehow causing you to be injured as either a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or a person in a car. So the moral of the story is, if it's offline, it doesn't have anything to do with Uber, the app I mean. If it is online, there are 3 phases of the process. If they don't yet have a ride, it's not going to be great for personal injury claimants. It's better than it used to be, but it's not great. If they have accepted a ride and they're en route to go pick somebody up, or they actually have picked somebody up, and you become injured by an Uber driver, you're going to have access to the $1 million coverage that Uber or Lyft provides. So you can feel good about that. The last part of this video covers Uber or Lyft drivers themselves. They're out there driving a lot. Obviously, the more you drive and the more you're on the streets, the more likely you are to be injured in a car accident. And we do have clients that are Uber and Lyft drivers, and they call us, and they're a little bit confused as well about who covers me. Do I have a workers' comp claim? Am I an employer or a contractor with Uber or Lyft? And the fact of the matter is they're independent contractors. There is no workers' comp through Uber and Lyft. Many Uber and Lyft drivers carry it themselves because they're self-employed. And so they're going to have access to having some of their bills paid that way. But if you're an Uber or Lyft driver and somebody else causes you to be injured in a car accident, you obviously are going to have a claim. You are going to also look to see the status of your app. If your app is off, then you need to sue or bring an insurance claim against the third party that caused the accident. You don't know how much coverage they're going to have. The same way we've talked about throughout here, which is why you should have good UIM insurance, because the next place you're going to turn is to your own UIM. And that will set the limit that you can recover in the event that you're hurt with your app off. If your app is on, then you're going to make a claim against the third party for their policy limits if your case warrants it. And if you do, in fact, get the policy, then you're going to turn to your UIM for additional recovery. And then finally, if you have exceeded the value available to you by the third party and your own UIM, I shouldn't say exceed, if you have received that amount, then you can turn your attention to Uber and Lyft's UIM policy of $1 million. So, that would be a pretty decent situation if your app is on. Anyway, that was this week's edition. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. Be happy to answer any questions you might have about any of this stuff involving Uber or Lyft, accidents, or anything else related to any personal injury matters. Thanks for watching, and look forward to seeing you again next week on Whiteboard Wednesday.